What's up, revolutionaries? DC here for Project Sanity, and we are on the Benjamin Dixon Network. We are on the Project Sanity channel, and we are streaming live on ourrevolution.tv. We have a special show today. Nis and Richard are taking a very well-deserved day off. And Eric Miller and I have hijacked the control room. We're going to do the best we can here to put a show on for you for the next 2 hours. We actually have a very special show. We have a number of delegates coming on from Washington and from California. Lauren Steiner, Adair, Schmidt, Kat Williams, and Josh is going to be with us. And I don't know Josh's last name. I don't know how to pronounce it. I don't want to mess it up. So he'll introduce himself. But we have a bunch of folks here talking about, we're going to deconstruct the Democratic Convention for you in our second hour and a half. But first, let me bring in my co-host here, Eric. Are you there, Eric? Can we hear you? Oh, go ahead. Say hi again. I got your audio on now.
Okay. As long as you got it on now, Dave, we're good.
Okay, great. Yeah, no, it's, I think we hear you now. Eric, how are you? Thanks for jumping in and helping me take over the ship here on
Yeah,
Project
no problem.
Sanity.
So I'm pretty excited about today's show. It's a little bit different format than we normally do. So it's going to be pretty cool to do kind of the panel and hear all these varying opinions. We've definitely got a diverse group of people here tonight, so that'll be pretty awesome to hear kind of an insider's perspective of the convention. Like you pointed out in one of our meetings, Dave, there hasn't been really, especially for us, a time to deconstruct and kind of release after the convention and talk about what really happened. And it'll be great to have these voices here to give us their perspective of what happened.
Sorry about that. I was actually trying to share something on Facebook real quick. I'm all right. How are you guys doing tonight?
Really? Oh, no.
I heard you at the beginning, but I can't hear you right
Okay. Sorry, I pushed the wrong button. This is going to be interesting. Eric, let's see. I don't know. I'm gonna hold news, I think, till the end. I think we've got guests in the room. We're gonna try to get to the conversation and see if I can work out my technical ends. We're just gonna go right into the conversation about the Democratic Convention because everybody's gonna be joining in here pretty soon anyway, and we're just gonna roll with it with like 6 guests. So. Eric, why don't you go ahead and do some introductions, and I'll do my best to get everybody in here and make sure we can see everybody.
All right, so yeah, we've got some great people with us tonight. First, we have Lauren Steiner, who I actually just read a great op-ed by her, and I'm sure she'll be more than willing to share about that, about her experience at the convention, and even a lot about pre-convention. And she's done a lot of great work in California and across the nation. She's a very, very strong activist, very strong voice, and she definitely fights hard for the types of things that we all here believe in. And so very honored to have her here with us tonight. And then we also have Adair Schmidt, who is a Washington delegate, and he's also a contributor on the show. And he will be talking with us tonight. He's done a lot of work to get all these delegates on here with us tonight. There's Adair waving his hand. Adair, I don't know if you want to say something real quick about how you feel about tonight's show and maybe introduce Kat and Josh to us.
Yeah. So tonight's show I think is going to be absolutely amazing. I worked quite extensively with a few of the people coming on today, both before and after Philly, in conjunction with what I was doing here on Project Sanity. But Kat and Josh are both Washington State delegates. They are both incredibly able people at what they do. I don't want to introduce you guys too much. I want to give you guys room to talk about yourselves as well. But I would say that there are not, that at least that I worked with, not two more capable, responsible people that I think really need to have their stories out and their experiences, because I believe that the more sides of a single story you can get, the better. So with that, I'll let them introduce themselves.
And it looks like Dave is getting this all together for us. So I just want to speak about some things that I observed after the convention. And one thing I talked about at a welcome home celebration that we had in Thurston County for the delegates was the Michael Salamone article, who is within the Progressive Army with us. I think he said it the best. He talked about how it was really a tale of two conventions, and you will see clips of that tonight, and I'm sure we'll hear that from the delegates. You had the convention that the mainstream media wanted you to see, and that the Democratic National Party wanted you to see, but you also had the real convention, as I believe, that I'm sure the delegates will speak about, and that those of us in the independent progressive media definitely saw. You didn't see the mainstream cover the protest inside or out. You didn't see the cat and mouse game between the protesters from the different delegations, especially California and Washington, and the Democratic Party trying to where the Democratic Party tried to silence the delegates and stop their protests. There was a lot of these things that they did not show you. Another thing that I think we'll see a clip of here that I heard speculated was even to the fact that they pulled Katy Perry on stage while there was a solidarity action between the California delegation and the Washington delegations with the cell phone lights to try to make it look like everybody was shining the cell phone lights for Katy Perry. So I think there's all these things that we saw go on, and I think Dave is ready to play one of these clips from a meeting that I went to this past Friday with delegates from my area talking about their experience, and I'm sure Kat, Adair, and Josh may recognize some of these people. So whenever Dave is ready to play that clip, we will be ready as well, and I'm sure he'll just cut me off, and I definitely don't mind that. And it looks like he's just queuing that up for us. So part of our coverage, Adair was filming, and there was one incident in particular during the No More War chant where some guy came down, I guess was it behind you guys, like a Hillary supporter, and like literally grabbed him and started screaming at him and saying, "How are you going to do this right now?" And they got in a full-blown confrontation. And there was another time during the walkout where a lady grabbed him and did the same thing and just started screaming at him. Were there a lot of incidents like that, or did he just happen to be in two of them?
He was doing the live streaming, which you're doing.
But also, I think, Adair had made a really valuable and important comment in one of our meetings. People were saying, we got to stand our ground. And Adair is an African-American male, a young African-American male. He expressed, when people act out, I'm the one that has to suffer through the repercussions because I feel like I will be targeted. And I can say for myself, as a young Caucasian white female, look like a wolf in sheep's clothing, people did not give me any problems. But I can say other people in our delegation, especially male and male minorities, have not had a similar thing. And I do think they were unfairly picked upon.
And I just want to share that actually I think in some ways the funnest, most exciting moment for me amongst everything was the last day, and we were truly engaged in an absolute cat and mouse game against them. And we were at the point where things weren't necessarily planned. They would do a move, we would do a move, they would do a move, we'd do a move. And I just loved it. And there were chants and stuff, but at one point, there was like a video going or something, so the lights were down. In California, they put all the flashlights on their phone, and they just started doing this. And of course, we saw that, so Washington popped up and did that, and then the other states, the other Bernie people saw that, and it was this absolute moment of solidarity with everybody else, with nothing planned, no words, no nothing, but if you felt that solidarity. And it was really funny because then Katy Perry came on, and they said, so, while she does her act, turn on your cell phone flashlights and wave them to her music. And then there was another point where we just started waving like this to California, and then they started waving back, and we started doing that to all of them. So it was like this total cat and mouse game. And, to think that this is the most powerful political machine to ever exist in the United States, and a bunch of us ragtag people could have them constantly guessing and on their feet. It is something to be incredibly proud of. And that's what I want to leave you with, on a moment of victory, because it really was. Thanks.
So then, one thing that we do want to talk about that is a nonpartisan issue is the lack of ADA accessibility. As the Democratic Party is a private organization, they actually do not have to follow ADA. So as you know, they had quotas for the amount of delegates they want that would be able to represent that they had people with disabilities of all different kinds, hearing, visual, mobility impairments, elderly, veterans with PTSD. This is actually a quote from one of our delegates' Facebooks talking about how she actually had to leave right after roll call vote had started because just access issue after access issue. They just crammed people into 88 areas, 30, 40 people deep, no accommodations. The shuttles would drop people off half a mile from the stadium in the extreme heat, in the extreme weather. People were promised wheelchairs, people were promised guides, people never showed up. It was a real travesty, and probably the worst thing I think about the entire convention.
I just want to say that we had Barbara Ullman, and she had issue with her leg, so we kind of went through all the troubles with her of going from the shuttle to the convention and back. And I just want to say that they put because there was no space, there's no ADA accessibility, they lined up all the people in our area, and Pam Keeley, who was a nurse, was also a delegate, had to take care of all of them. She requested help from other delegates, Hillary delegates, and she asked, well, could you also contribute with the help to delegates? And the response she got was, we are all unified, so why don't you take care of all of them?
That kind of rubbed me when they talked about what was happening with the folks with the ADA. I was so angry with that. And I don't know, it's open, a lot of you may know, I actually have multiple sclerosis, and it affects my eyesight. So there are times when, if you see me driving, you should be very afraid.
Don't ride with her either.
So, but I kept thinking about, at any moment in that convention, because stress does affect MS, I could have woken up and not had very good eyesight. And I could have had to have somebody helping me getting around. And I thought about what it would be if that had been me needing that help and in those positions. And it made me so viscerally angry the day after the roll call vote with the stuff that went on, and having it so unsafe that they had so many wheelchairs in one area that the wheelchairs were actually like connected and getting tangled up with each other. But the one thing I do want to say too, and this is what was disturbing to me, and I really had a long conversation with another delegate there, because I'm like, okay, am I putting on the tinfoil hat here or what? But, you know, I hung out with a couple of other troublemakers, labor folks, and at a certain point we sat down and we compared conversations, and some of you guys might remember there was this very young guy who was always hanging out with us when we were in our stands, but he also was at the hotel, and he was at the party, and he was at the event where I saw my good friend Mr. Remember that, where we saw each other? Yeah, my little shadow was there watching that too. So, yeah, it's really disturbing to think that. And I'm pretty sure he was just DNC because he really wasn't very good at the surveillance thing, because we figured out he was doing it. But there's that. And we did have somebody from our delegation who was pulled off by the Secret Service, who was one of the people that had been instrumental in starting On the Chance, and he was pulled off by the Secret Service. Nothing really happened to him. They just talked to him for a while, but it was intimidation.
All right, so that is the end of the clips there. And so I don't know if everybody here with us on the panel was necessarily watching the clips, but I'll just kind of bring them up topic by topic maybe, and then we can kind of discuss the different things that the delegates talked about. And so the first thing that I think would be really cool to talk about with the the first thing that I think would be really cool to talk about, especially because we have Lauren here with us, and then we also have a few people from the Washington delegation, was the moment of solidarity with the camera phone flashlights. And so maybe if Lauren, if you're ready, if you could maybe speak about that moment first, the moment with the camera phones and everybody using their flashlights from the Washington delegation and the California delegation, and describe why the flashlights were used and how that moment of solidarity kind of happened.
Okay. When do you want me to do that? I mean, are we back? Are we back live?
We're live and direct.
Okay, well, I didn't realize this at the time, but I was told that how the lights happen. Well, first of all, the Washington and Oregon delegation decided to chant "No More War" over Panetta's speech, and we all chimed in. And then whoever was controlling the lights decided to turn off the lights on those two delegations. And I didn't realize this until after the fact, but somebody said that we in California started chanting "lights, lights, lights," and people heard it as lies, lies, lies. But in any case, after that chant got repeated, I guess it prompted the delegates in those two delegations to turn on their cell phone flashlight. And it basically made a very powerful statement, so much so that the DNC decided to turn back the lights on those two delegations.
And so if we could get some maybe Adair or Kat to talk about, or Josh to talk about the experience of that moment from the Washington delegation, that would be superb.
Kat,
Well,
Josh, why don't you guys take this lead, and then I'll talk about how I saw it afterwards.
Okay, well, this is Josh. Last name is pronounced Troopin, by the way. I was promised that Nis and Richard would be on this week, but I'm disappointed. But anyway, so we, after the nomination and the floor count on Tuesday, we basically made a conscious decision to address issues specifically, because there's not going to be a nomination fight. There's not that much use in trying to convince people to change delegates and stuff like that. So Leon Panetta came up, and a lot of what we saw all week, everything was either about Trump, and we were told, oh, we're going to have an upbeat convention. We're not just going to talk about Trump. And then we just had 4 days of Trump. And a lot of it was really designed to appeal not to the 45% of the Sanders delegates in the room, but to Republicans watching on TV. And that really came to a head with Leon Panetta's speech about how great we'll all be at war, which is when we started to chant, no more wars. That's really one of the major factors why I left any support of Clinton back in 2002 when I lived in New York. So we started to chant, and as you may have seen and you talked about, they hit the lights on our sections. Now, one of the interesting things is that I have a page on Facebook where I'm talking about all the things that happened during the week. And a couple days after the convention, a guy who I didn't know, who was evidently part of the David Brock Correct the Record crew or something like that, actually came on and disputed me and said there was no ability to turn the lights off in individual sections, so I'm just making that up. He was not there. I was there. We saw the lights go out in Washington, Oregon, and California.
Hey, Josh.
Yes.
If he needs the video, I believe I have that saved. So.
Well, that was about the point where, for some reason, they thought that was going to remove attention from us, when in fact the TV cameras swing our way, which is when we all started to put our phones up and have basically a phone light vigil against war at that point. And I have a cousin from Colorado who texted me at that point saying, "Oh my God, you're on TV," and sent a screenshot of us holding up our phones and yelling in the dark. So that was one of the big moments where we really, it was clear at that point that there was not going to be any tolerance for basically core Democratic Party values like opposition to war, opposition to fracking, opposition to bad trade deals, and they were trying to drown us out either by turning the lights out or having planned chants over us or just holding signs up in front of us for the week. And that's what I saw by way of unity. That's was their definition of unity during the week in Philadelphia.
Right. Well, hey, Kat, do you want to jump in after you unmute yourself, of course?
Yeah. Well, another interesting aspect of that, especially the No More War chant, was actually you, Adair, and Josh were two of the people that there were a lot of celebrities and basically rich people sitting right behind us, like the row behind us. And when we did that No More War chant, and when we were holding up our signs, they kind of kept saying, sit down, like, why are you chanting? And most of them on the surface were completely oblivious to, the issues that were actually happening here. But Adair and Josh, you two were kind of two of the people that got into it a little bit with some of the people behind us, and as the lights were going off during that chant, and it was kind of clear to me in another way. I mean, we had all worked so hard to get there as delegates, and these people they got free seats by donating $10,000 to the Democratic Party, so free attendance. But a lot of the world doesn't really know what is going on, and didn't really know, especially since the media framed these protests as just kind of aggravating, like in the way type things. But it just kind of struck me how uninformed so many people are. And if there's one thing that we did do, despite the lack of mainstream corporate media coverage at the convention for Sanders delegates, we did kind of bring at least some of that to light. So at least some people are talking about it.
Yeah, that's very true. So for those of you who don't know, especially those of you at home, some of the people that were sitting directly behind me and Kat and Josh, you two will remember quite clearly that very, very thin barrier, just very low wall that separated us and the donor class, as I call them. The person who actually reached over the barrier and grabbed me, it was yelling at me about disrespecting veterans, and he was a combat veteran, and, you know, stop disrespecting them, where, you know, a few of our members of our delegation, Kate, Dorothy, are both veterans, and were two of the, like, at least from what I could hear, two of the loudest people chanting "No more war." And so even pointing that out actually escalated the situation a little bit more. I don't know if we caught any of that here on Project Sanity at the time I was live streaming. So my experience with the lights was I saw California go out after, I believe it was either you, Josh, or someone else sitting quite close to me was like, hey, look at California, the lights are out. And when we noticed California's lights were out, people started holding up their cell phones with the flashlight on and waving them at California. And then that's when the lights chant began, and that kind of snowballed for quite a few people. But I get to Josh's point again, to correct the record person, it happened. I mean, we were sitting there, they turned out the lights on us, and anyone that says you can't turn the lights out in a specific section in a sports arena doesn't watch sports or has no idea about how arena planning typically would go.
Right.
It'd be one of your biggest features there. So I don't know. I think it was one of those things that just kind of happened. I don't feel it was quite on par with our walkout, which for me was a different kind of fear. But I think the repercussions of, if you guys remember this Secret Service people, ICE agents, all those folks coming up and standing by the stairs where the bulk of our Bernie delegation sat, lifting up the, doing the whole I'm going to yawn thing and then kind of flash my weapon here or my handcuffs there. Doing the whole I'm going to hold down my earpiece, I'm going to talk about you guys, referring to those of you wearing the bright yellow shirts as hot spots. I mean, it was just, it was an Orwellian mess, and I wish I could say I was really shocked. I really do wish I could say that, but after having listened to some of the Democrats talk, it really just isn't that surprising.
Right, that was kind of where I was at too. I went into it knowing we were gonna have a lot of kind of obstruction, and we were not going to just be free to make our voices heard. But by the end of the convention, I mean, anyone that even had a Bernie Sanders, shirt or button, they were kind of like a hot spot in certain ways. I remember another national delegate and I were standing in the aisle talking to one of our other delegates about where we were going to sit, and one of the security guards came up and started talking on his radio. We're going to have a problem with these two women in the Washington section. No one was walking anywhere in the aisle. We weren't in anyone's way, but he just came up and was basically like, am I going to have to kick you guys out, basically, for standing there, which I expected some of that coming into it, but a lot of it, especially towards the end, was pretty surprising.
I think one of the things that I saw was after Adair got kind of poked and prodded and kicked through the railing, when he touched the railing, security told him that he was invading the VIP space and that he was subject to removal. And there were times when they just decided to make an example of people. So one of our delegates had a big Seahawks number 12 sign, and security led him away with the sign. And this was also not at Adair's order, because I'm sure he would have preferred to get the 12 sign out of there. But but he had the sign removed, and he was told he could not bring the sign back in, and he would be removed from the arena permanently if he did anything like that again. some signs were allowed in. We suddenly had a non-regulation big Hillary banner unfurled behind us during the roll call on Tuesday. That made it in. One of the interesting sequences during the week is that one of our delegates, who had been a political prisoner under Saddam Hussein for several years before escaping, had a small sign that said, "I support Palestinian human rights." He was holding it up near the microphone for the roll call. One of the Clinton superdelegates on camera reached over and pulled it out of his hands and tossed it while she continued to smile into the camera for national television. It was not just security. There were several actions by Clinton delegates, Clinton superdelegates. We had another superdelegate who swore at us because he wanted to walk through our ADA section, and he said, "F you, I walk where I want." So it was coming from all sides, and it increased during the week because it was a 55 to 45 ratio, Clinton to Sanders. But as they filled the arena up during the week, the ratio increased to probably 10,000 to 1,800 by the end of the week, in order to marginalize the delegates who were the people who were supposed to be there. And that's a lot of what I experienced.
Well, that's something you just brought up, something that I heard quite a bit about, and I think we all, those of us that are delegates, and Lauren, if you want to jump in on this too with your experience over in the California delegation, the paid seat fillers. Do you guys remember them when we were sitting and these people without credentials came in? And I think I've got the two best experiences that I have that sum this whole thing up. Is before the convention started, I believe it was Thursday. Josh, you and I got there incredibly early that day. Thank God for subways.
Yes.
But we got there incredibly early, and as I'm sitting in the Washington area, I see two people that I have no idea, who they are. And so I go over, because this is after I was asked by the Hillary delegation's sub-caucus chair to help bounce anybody that was not a Washington State delegate out of our chairs, because they even had issues with seat fillers coming down. I went over and I talked to them, and he was like, "Well, I'm a delegate, and so is she." And I was like, "Well, I've never seen you guys before, and I know most of our delegates." So I was like, "Can you guys answer just one simple question really quick? Who is our state party chair?" And the response was, "I don't know." And so I said, "Well, if you don't know who our state party chair is, I don't think you're a delegate, and I'm going to have to ask you to leave our section." To which he replied, "Well, let me make a phone call to somebody else in the state party who's fairly high up." And he's like, "Here." He talked to him. He's like, "Here, talk to this gentleman who doesn't believe that I'm a delegate." And I was like, "I'm not going to talk on the phone. I'll get the Hillary subcaucus chair, and if you're a Hillary delegate, he'll let me know." Well, Javier comes down, and the guy does the same thing. "Well, talk to this guy on the phone. Talk to this guy on the phone, blah, blah, blah. I donated so much money. You guys need to let me sit here." I mean, just absolutely ornery about it. And I was like, "Well, that's what it is." So he ended up being lent the floor passes from our state party chair and some finance person within the party, and they thought that made them delegates. And because they donated so much money, they could do whatever they wanted, and I just had to kiss their feet. Well, that's not happening, at least from my end. I don't know, Kat, Josh, Lauren, what were your guys' experience with some of the seat fillers and just general assholery that happened?
Well, I always managed to sit up front with the Hillary delegates because I wanted to get into their midst. So I was not as harassed as the rest of our delegation who were up in, the nosebleed section.
Right.
As the week went on, they moved us higher and higher so as to put us out of the view of the camera, because they realized that a lot of the action was coming from the California delegation. So by the end of the week, we appointed whips. We had a meeting every morning. I don't know if you guys did this, but every morning we had a meeting in the Marriott. We elected our own representatives because we weren't going to be content with Jerry Brown representing us. So about a month before the convention, we started the process of electing, and we didn't call them chairs, we called them co-representatives, and it was Karen Bernal, who was a co-chair, actually, of the California Democratic Party's Progressive Caucus and pretty radical, and Bill Honigman, who was Progressive Democrats of Orange County, and also a close friend of Tim Carpenter, the late Tim Carpenter, who actually had the idea to have Bernie Sanders run. So those two were elected, and then we had regional coordinators, as we called them. We didn't like the idea of the word whip. It sounded too violent, so we called them regional coordinators. And they were the ones who were sort of in charge of getting information out to our regions, because California is so large. And Melissa Michelson was our Southern California regional coordinator. So we actually had a meeting at her house the weekend before the convention to talk about what we were going to do, because as I said in my article, we were really operating in a vacuum. Do you want me to talk about before the convention now, or do you want to get to that later?
Let's save that for a little bit later and just kind of talk about the seat fillers real quick, because I do want to get Kat and Josh too.
Yeah, so what happened with that was Melissa Michelson, and we also, because they got so aggressive towards the end of the week, we had people that were in charge of standing in the aisles and guarding our seats. We had people come on Thursday. In fact, I remember getting texts as early as 1 o'clock from Josephine Piorelli, who was from San Diego, and she was fantastic because every day she came in a costume, and the first day she came as Princess Leia in Star Wars, and the second day she came as Lady Liberty, and then on Thursday she was dressed in a suit, and we said, who are you dressing like? And she said, a Clinton delegate. So I said, well, you need a lot more Clinton swag if you want people to think you're a Clinton delegate. So she was on the lookout for as many Clinton buttons as she could find. But in any case, Melissa Michelson was accosted, basically, and almost thrown out for basically doing what you just said, checking credentials. Because people were coming in and they were taking these seats that we had come early to save. And even when we got there early at like 1 o'clock, we had seen that they put all these little white papers on all the seats that basically said reserved for Hillary delegates. So our people took them off and, you know, put our own bags or whatever we could put there to try to reserve the seats for ours. And then, you know, when the conflict started and they tried to remove Melissa for basically asking to see people's credentials, our people swarmed around her, started videotaping live on Facebook Live, and shouting, "Let her go! Let her go!" I mean, I felt like I was in an Occupy, you know, encampment here on the floor of the Democratic Convention. I was looking up at it from down in my seats, but they managed to keep her inside, and we secured our area as much as we could, considering all the shenanigans that were going on.
Yeah. Kat, Josh, what were your guys' experiences with some of the seat fillers and, again, just the general brutishness, I guess would probably be a better word, that we experienced, both as individuals but also as a delegation?
Well, I can tell you that it started to really pick up on Tuesday, and it got worse through the week. As we were kind of in a location where we were like a dead end with a rail behind us, but we still had a lot of random seat fillers coming up, and you would ask them what state they were from, or just, you know, a simple question like that, if we could help them. And in every instance, instead of answering like a normal person, they would say something like, "Okay, settle down," or "I'm not talking to you." So it's my opinion that they were told to try to incite some action by Sanders delegates for the purpose of, you know, getting security over to, you know, on a pretext. And it got the worst on Thursday when we had a number of just people, they looked like, you know, college Democrats, starting to just pack our stairway, which was obviously, you know, a fire hazard, and they wouldn't leave. And our whip, Pam, you know, told them they had to leave, and one of the young men grabbed her. She started yelling, "Get your hands off me," and I jumped down with my cell phone camera and started filming. The second I turned it on, his hands were off her, and then he started doing the "okay, calm down, lady" hands at her, and was trying to make her seem like she was nuts. So I just held the camera right up to his face, and as soon as he saw him getting on camera, didn't know whether he was being live streamed or what, he and his two friends just filed out. They just left the area with their heads down so that they wouldn't get on camera. But all week there was just outbreak after outbreak of belligerence from seat fillers. It was beyond just people saying, "Oh, can I sit here?" It was actual verbal and sometimes physical aggression from non-delegates towards Sanders delegates.
Right. Kat, what did you see, experience, deal with as it pertains to those folks?
Yeah, so I personally didn't experience any. I only saw one person who I thought was a seat filler, and I had gone to some sort of like small meeting or ran to get some water or something, and I came back to my seat, and this random guy I knew was not a delegate was sitting in my seat, didn't really have any, anything on him, like he didn't have any buttons on, he didn't have any bag, he was just sitting there. And the row was pretty much open at that time. It was pretty early. And I just said, "Get out of my seat." And he got out of my seat. But what I will say is that yeah, maybe I was a little bit more firm than that. But on the day of the roll call, we had kind of a, right before Washington came on the screen, we had to get a lot of the disabled delegates and people that were in the ADA section out. So a lot of security and employees came to help with that, and we got them all out of the ADA section, which is where we were all kind of congregating for the roll call. But then they stuck around afterwards, definitely after the fact, after we had gotten everyone, all the wheelchairs safely out. They were definitely still kind of trying to cause a little bit of what I saw as chaos in for the roll call, because by this time the Hillary banner hadn't been put up. We had a lot of people right in front with Bernie signs, and the reason for that is because our state party chair, Jackson, actually said, "Okay, we need to make room for Sanders delegates up here. This is their day. They won the state." He was very adamant about having us in the frame, having Bernie signs in there, and when those security guards stuck around and were kind of, especially towards the back of that congregation, kind of telling people to move and shifting people right up to the last minute, Jackson, to his credit, I was 2 people away from him, and he went up to those people and said, "I don't know who you are. Thank you for your help. Get out of our section." And so I have a lot of respect for him for that. And I know some people kind of in our meeting expressed anger about the Hillary sign coming up, but out of everyone, he was the one who really advocated for Sanders supporters being in that frame, and for anyone that was trying to disrupt that to literally get out of our section. So I think that was another thing that stuck out to me, the separation between whoever was causing this at the DNC level, the National Committee level, the separation between that and the state parties.
Right. I would agree with you there wholeheartedly, actually. And again, to his credit, I think Jackson was probably the fairest state party chair there. And I do want to draw a really clear distinction between the DNC and your local state party. They're completely different entities.
Right.
So don't confuse the two. if you've worked with your state party and you've gotten to know people in your state party, those people aren't the DNC. They don't make all of the rules that the DNC does. Now, back to getting a little bit more on topic, at least from my end, one of my other experience with those seat fillers came when with what Josh was talking about. As I was standing in live recording on Thursday, I had actually started to act as a bouncer for the section just because I can physically block the walkway and not have to really deal with too much. However, at one point, I stood up near the back, and one of the ladies that I'd been having an absolute issue with the entire week, hi, if you're watching, by the way, she was overzealous about everything, but she let me live stream from the walkway that one time. And I see just this row of people start coming up, and they're standing, just completely packing the walkway. It's absolutely impossible for anybody to get down if there's a fire. If something were to happen, we would have been stuck in our section because these uncredentialed folk were allowed to stand there. So when I spoke to them, my first question was, are you a Washington delegate? The answer was, well, no, I'm not. I said, well, then I need you to move. And she was like, well, there's a wheelchair coming. So I look over the side of the railing, and funny enough, there's no wheelchair. There is no wheelchair that's coming. And then at the end that we were at, there is no access for wheelchairs into the ADA section. So it was a flimsy excuse to begin with, and one easily debunked. But she kept escalating the situation, both hollering and then getting loud. And at one point she said, because I told her, I was like, this is my section, this is Washington State section, I need you to go. You're making this a fire hazard. It's unsafe for us to be in our area. She said, you don't own it. You need to physically remove me from here. I want to see you physically pick me up and take me out of this section because I'm going to stand here the whole night. One sec, Eric. And so after that, I appealed to the Secret Service at the bottom of our stairs and said, hey, guys, they need to get out of here. This is a fire hazard. We're having issues. Wheelchairs can't even come through here. And the Secret Service guy shrugged at me and then gave her an I'm sorry look and offered to help her out because apparently it's the delegates that were the problem. And then shortly after this, we had the gentleman she was with grab our whip Pam, who is a retired nurse and a lovely person. But Eric, I saw you, man. My bad.
Yeah, sorry. I have to do the boring part. I just have to make sure that we thank the Benjamin Dixon channel. Sorry to interrupt this discussion, but I just want to make sure we interrupt the Benjamin Dixon. Thank the Benjamin Dixon channel, not interrupt it. For hosting our show, and you can also check out our show on our own channel, which is very easily accessible at projectsanity.org. We've been having a great discussion here. It's been awesome. I want to make sure, I kind of wanted to hear about one of the things that was in one of those clips we played was about surveillance on the Washington delegation, and I was wondering from Lauren, actually, if there's anything like that happened in the California delegation. And then I think maybe we should get Brandon in here. He's like the only East Coast guy to ask a couple questions to the delegates as well.
And real quick, folks at home, we've got about 10 more minutes with Josh before we have to run and do some Democrat Party stuff. So just a heads up there.
Ask your question again, please.
I just wanted to know, so one of the clips we played, and I don't know if everybody was able to hear them, was the chair of my local county Democrats actually talking about the fact that some Bernie delegates were actually surveillanced and tailed. There was one person in particular that followed her to multiple events, to their hotel, was out watching them when they were waiting for their Uber, was at the restaurants they went to, and she thought she was crazy until she started talking to other delegates, and they recognized that the same young man was following them around everywhere. And so I was wondering if there was any kind of surveillance like this or anything fishy, basically, that you noticed within the California delegation from an outside force.
Well, we didn't notice anything like that, or I haven't heard anybody report on anything like that happening. The only thing that we were concerned about was when we were having our morning meetings, we decided not to have them in the breakfast room because we didn't know who was going to be sitting around and listening. So we decided to go off to the weight room. And so there we were, like 150 of us, surrounded by all these weights. And soon enough, some security person from the hotel came in and said we weren't allowed to be there. So we moved into the pool. So then we were all like around the periphery of the pool. And the next day, well, actually the same day, they came and said, okay, we're going to give you a room. So we were a little suspicious about the room that they had given us, and somebody was saying that perhaps the room was bugged. So when we were talking about, I felt like I was in one of those spy movies. When we were talking about the actions that we were going to do, whether it was the TPP protest or the walkout, we used a big whiteboard, and we wrote on the whiteboard, and I remember several times walking around the entire room to make sure everybody saw what was on the whiteboard, because we didn't want to, you know, say it out loud. And some people suppose that the way they got a hold of our chants might have been because the room was bugged, but I think it was more likely a mole in our delegation. And there was one particular super volunteer who was very close with the campaign and was pretty much serving as the eyes and the ears for the campaign within our delegation. And you know, I kind of suspect him for reporting those chants. And he was also on the floor with a little yellow vest, you know, trying to, you know, do essentially the same thing that the DNC volunteers were doing, which was keep everybody in order. So I kind of saw him as a double agent, to be honest with you, to continue the analogy of my spy movie. But as far as people being surveilled as they moved around Philadelphia, I haven't heard anything like that.
Hey, Josh.
All right.
Oops,
Josh?
I think you just something got muted there. The only real issue about surveillance that I heard was one of our alternates, Brian, getting calls allegedly from his family or something like that. I don't know the exact story behind it, but we got a conference room in advance, so we were able to kind of control our meetings in the morning, which was quite handy. We also had kind of like a virtual media room where we were able to stay after the morning meeting and get talking points out, get press releases out, and get some of the media coverage that we were able to get out. One day we had a woman kind of wander into our meeting. I believe that was Thursday. None of us recognized her, but she had also wandered into a karaoke event that we had on Saturday night before the convention. So it was kind of a puzzle who she was, but we kind of moved her along pretty quickly.
Yeah, I definitely remember that. I believe she said she was a member of the Massachusetts delegation. So for those at home, the DNC reserves blocks of rooms at hotels, and the hotels can charge whatever extravagant price they want, but they usually group at least two states together. In Washington, we roomed with the Massachusetts folks. So she said she was a Massachusetts delegate, but either way, she was told to leave pretty quick.
She was actually a Hawaii delegate.
Oh, really? Well, Kat, you definitely know more than I do. I'm curious to hear your experiences as well.
Well, like Josh said, the first night we were there, I think Saturday night, we all went to a restaurant and they had karaoke. So we were all there, and she just followed us to the restaurant, and none of us knew her. She had been, I think Kate and Jessica Blows had been in the Rules Committee meeting, and this woman, I believe, was in the Rules Committee meeting with them, and she came to dinner with us, and she sat with us for a while. She kind of sat away from our table for a while too, and we didn't really think a thing of it. But she was definitely a Hawaii delegate, and then she shows up the last day in our meeting, our Sanders delegate meeting after breakfast, and yeah, she was. It's hard to say. I had heard that someone in our delegation had posted the meeting time on like a different kind of Bernie page thing. So she could have just wandered in and thought it was like a different coalition's meeting. But it was pretty interesting. And then I think it kind of went around that she had said she was a Massachusetts delegate. I don't know if she had said that or if that had kind of just gotten kind of twisted around, but she definitely was a Hawaii delegate.
That's good to know. By the way, so I've got some comments here from YouTube. So according to Chad, one of our other delegates and a great friend of Project Sanity here, we love the guy. He says that the woman had learned of the meeting because we had a guest from Election Justice, and someone had posted a notice about Election Justice on a public board somewhere. At least that was her story. And then Megan Little, and if this is the same Megan that I'm thinking of, who was also another awesome Washington delegate, said
Yes.
she told us she was from Hawaii, but we looked in the convention book and we could not find her name. So that, for me, is a little suspect there, that we could have someone just randomly pop up like that and there be no record of who they are. I mean, it's not entirely surprising with all the other stuff that went on. I know that Thursday in particular was, I think, actually my worst night when it came to people harassing, yelling, and then even in some cases I do believe following. I went to go to the bathroom at one point and noticed somebody in the same suit followed me on the way there and then was with me on the way back, and it was unnerving to experience. I'm wondering who else really was targeted by, if not the donor class, but by just anybody who happened to be around. And also, real quick, I just want to throw a thank you out to Josh. I know you have to take off in a few minutes, but your contributions here have been really appreciated, man. We just want to say thank you for that.
Thank you so much.
No, thank you. I mean, really though, it was such a shock. I know the last night I sat in front of a wealthy white, very upper middle, I wouldn't even say, very wealthy white family, the whole nine, and this was right before they announced Hillary Clinton. Well, after they handed out the flags, guys. I don't remember if you guys remember when they did that, but right after they handed the flags out, I held mine upside down in protest, especially after the parading by the DNC of brown children whose parents were illegal as political props, and the mothers of black police officers that had lost their lives in the line of duty as a way of saying, well, forget you guys, Black Lives Matter, it's your fault, take care of your own people, including police officers. I held my flag upside down, and then at one point I wrote Black Lives Matter on it, and continued to hold that up in protest, and the vitriol that was thrown at me from the wealthy family sitting behind me, you're an American, go back to where you came from, you're a piece of shit, how could you do that, you're a horrible person, you don't deserve to be in this country. This is at the Democrats convention, mind you guys, the Democrats convention, and I'm being told I'm un-American and to go back where I came from. Well, side note for those of you who don't know, I'm both Native and Black, Asian, and Puerto Rican, so I mean, can't really do all that, but whatever. What did you guys get? What was your sense of what happened while we were there?
Go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, go ahead, whoever wants to talk, because there was kind of a little break there.
Oh, Adair, did you mean kind of what happened last?
Well, I mean, with you guys, with harassment, with any of your experiences. I've been talking largely negative, but if you guys have some positive experiences you guys want to share, or things that you think went well, I think that would also be wonderful to hear, because, I mean, my personal experience was horrible, but I don't think that everybody's was.
Yeah, I mean, my personal experience, I definitely would not say it was horrible. I had plenty of positive experiences, as well as, some really, really trying and very kind of discouraging moments. But there were plenty of moments. I was really impressed with you know, our Sanders delegation for kind of even after the fact, after the convention, we've still all stayed very much in solidarity. We've been, you know, talking about meetups and ways to get progressives elected in the general. And to me, that's I'm definitely focusing on that alone as, you know, one of the biggest takeaways from the convention, that we went through a lot of ups and downs throughout the entire week, but at the end of the day, we built kind of this coalition of, you know, people that are politically active, will continue to be politically active, kind of have each other's backs, support each other, and are going to be involved in this movement and this revolution and progressive politics for a really long time. And just building that coalition and those relationships, to me, is what I have been really trying to stay focused on. But, you know, there were some very discouraging. This seems like a really, really small thing, but the merchandise booth really, really, really rubbed me the wrong way. And it was because there was basically, you know, all of these Hillary shirts and posters and basically propaganda, which was kind of expected. I thought they would have maybe had at least, you know, a few Sanders type things to buy, but the only Sanders product you could buy was a t-shirt that had him depicted as just like pretty much indisputably different than he actually looks, and it looked kind of like borderline offensive. And then there was right above it all these like very propaganda-esque kind of signs and posters that you could buy for Hillary merchandise. But I encourage anyone who's watching to kind of look up the merchandise booth, because I can't really describe it, and it seems, just when you're talking about it, it seems like a really minuscule thing. But walking into that, I think that it was kind of indicative of the entire week in a lot of ways. You know, they barely acknowledged Senator Sanders and his movement a lot of times, but when they did, it was kind of almost, for many, it was kind of like in a demeaning way, and that's kind of what the merch booth represented to me as well. But like I said, there were plenty of I built relationships with plenty of Clinton delegates as well as Sanders delegates, and there were plenty that you know want the same things that we do, and kind of are have the same general views as us. But I think that a lot of people, and I was very lucky to not have that many, you know, horrible experiences, but a lot of people did, and I think that really overshadows a lot of, you know, the good relationships that we built. And that is something that the Clinton campaign and Clinton delegates need to take into account. You know, one single really, really bad interaction that is, you know, kind of uncalled for on their part can overshadow a lot of groundwork they laid with unity, per se.
Well, I'd like to take the counter approach to that, because I think it was the Bernie delegates that sort of set the tone from day one. And I write about this in my article when I say that we really went to that convention in a vacuum, because we had been told in California that we needed to stay in the Marriott, which was $700 a night, and even with people having 4 and 5 people in a room, that was still unaffordable for the 4-night minimum that they required. And it seemed like that was the only thing that the Sanders campaign really cared about in the run-up to this convention. We had our confirmed California delegates Facebook page that Katrina Bergstrom started. She was fantastic in administering our group and making sure that all the delegates got in that page and participated in the election that I spoke about. and there was a Sanders staffer, Hector Rivera, who was in that page, and the only thing he ever posted about was, you know, making sure that we were staying there, to which everybody would respond, well, are they going to give us any money towards that? Because the GoFundMe pages that everybody set up weren't really providing everything they needed. And then, of course, when Bernie endorsed Hillary 2 weeks before the convention, the funding pretty much dried up. It's like people are like, why are we sending you there if he's not even going to fight for the nomination? And then also when it was reported finally in the last week that he was going to contribute some money, then it really dried up. So I think people did get money, and that all worked out. But that was the only thing that they really seemed to care about. And we were told we were supposed to stay there because we were going to be conferring with us. We needed to be in one place so they could confer with us after the breakfast meeting, and they could confer with us at the end of the night, and it may be as late as midnight, and, you know, don't expect to get any sleep. And we'd been told all these things, and none of it materialized. So, you know, even the first day when we had a breakfast, there was nobody to come and talk to us to tell us what we were going to do there. So when we saw the list of speakers to our California delegation for the 4 breakfasts, and we could see they were all Hillary surrogates and Hillary endorsers, and there was they didn't even throw a bone to Bernie to have one person who had supported Bernie come and speak to us. I think that really pissed everybody off and rubbed everybody the wrong way, and so we started booing even before we got to the convention. I mean, we booed during the breakfast, and we booed at the convention, and it kind of pissed me off because I'd been planning for a whole week this TPP action, and I really wanted it to take center stage so it would get noticed, and by the time it finally happened, you know, there had been so much booing. There was so much booing before it and so much booing afterwards at the mention of her very name, or at the mention of anybody's name who endorsed her. It just seemed to me that, yeah, I get that it showed that we weren't going to be unified. You know, I got that. But then on the other hand, I felt bad for the, you know, the Clinton delegates that, like us, spent a lot of money to come to this thing. In fact, we had a unity cocktail party that one of our delegates set up with a Clinton delegate, and we had a ulterior motive. We had, as part of our 3-part plan, this TPP plan, which only one part of it was the mic check on the floor, but the second part was to have a unity statement by Hillary and Bernie delegates, to have them sign off on basically what the platform committee didn't sign off on, which is the minority report of Jim Hightower saying that the Democratic Party says that the TPP must not come up for a vote during the lame duck session of Congress. So we had this little unity cocktail party, and not all the California delegates were there at all. It was very, very small. But it was actually a wonderful thing, and I was sitting next to this Hillary delegate, and we talked about our kids, and we had so much in common, and this and that, and the issues of the country that concerned us, and then, you know, the next day I was just really horrified to see sort of how unruly we were. I mean, one of the things that we had discussed in our TPP planning was that we did not want to come off like Nevada, because Nevada, you know, gave Bernie a bad name because even though they didn't throw chairs, they were accused of throwing chairs, they were accused of being violent, and the mainstream media just had a field day with it, which is why we had planned our action to be so very disciplined. So when there was just all this sort of boorish behavior, basically coming out of not only the fact that Bernie didn't give us anything to do, he didn't give us to fight for his nomination, even though he said it would be a contested convention. There was no floor fight on the platform. There was no floor fight on the rules. In fact, one of the things that he said he was going to do, the reason why he didn't introduce any of the minority reports on the platform, was he wanted to reserve his powder for a floor fight on the rules about the superdelegates. So when I was in that Rules Committee meeting on Sunday, I couldn't believe the way his campaign produced this unity statement, unity commission, unity reform commission that they had obviously already agreed to even in advance of the Rules Committee meeting. It was like there was Jeff Weaver and Mark Launabach selling out, you know, just basically putting lipstick on a pig about this reform commission, saying it was such a victory for the Sanders campaign when it was clearly something that was not even mandatory that it be passed. Yes, they had to come up with reforms, but the DNC didn't have to pass the reforms. And the committee was stacked with Clinton appointees and DNC appointees, just like the Platform Committee and the Rules Committee were. So it was really very disappointing. And when you take all of that combined with the DNC email leaks, which, just confirmed what we already knew, I feel the mood going into that convention was very, very sour. And when I was sitting there that first night, I was sitting next to this middle-aged Indian couple who were so reserved and so polite, and I felt really bad because they had spent all this money and they wanted to hear these speeches, and we were, chanting over them, basically. So in our breakfast on Tuesday morning, we sort of regrouped and we decided that we had to be a lot more strategic with our actions going forward. And, I think it worked out a lot better. And I would also concur with what Kat said. We made some great relationships with our fellow delegates, and these are relationships that will continue going forward. I know that LA for Bernie, the group that I organized, we have just changed our name to Our Revolution Los Angeles, and we're going to be having an organizing meeting on the 24th, and after Bernie's live stream, we're going to be talking about, prioritizing issues that we want to fight on. I'm sure a lot of delegates are going to be there. So, I think Bernie is doing something that he said he was going to do. Two things that he said he was going to do, he did. He allowed us all to vote for him and have the roll call. And then the second thing is continuing the organization, because he always criticized Obama for disbanding his Organizing for America. And I think it's very clear that Bernie is actually putting, money and personnel into this Our Revolution organization, as well as 2 other entities that he has started.
That's awesome. Real quick, though, I know Eric and Brandon have really been waiting and been really awesome. I know you guys have had to listen to us delegates talk a whole bunch. So what questions do you guys have, and what observations did you have as folks outside of the DNC? I think you had your hand up, Brandon, so, I'd love to hear from you, and then after that, I want to get to a couple YouTube comments.
Yeah, just want to say before I start, thank you both, and thank you to Troop and Ferlito, who just left, for coming on. It's been wonderful hearing you guys talk about this, especially having that sort of inside perspective. I'm going to put forth an idea here, and it might be just me in my opinion, but I think the DNC, in my eyes, from watching from the outside, was worse to watch than the RNC was. And I think a lot of that has to do with what Adair said, where it's that sort of feeling that, we're the Democrats, we're the liberal party here, and we're supposed to be, not trumpeting, not having like the war machine, not parading minorities out to sort of put a black face on these neoliberal policies. Like, it was disappointing. And I know like their goal was to stamp out any sort of dissent because they didn't want a sort of chaotic Republican type meeting as well. But as opposed to it coming across as the Bernie Sanders delegation being in the minority, it came across, like Adair said, like a sort of an Orwellian situation where the DNC had this very thin mask of unity, a very thin mask of hope, a very thin mask of, of progressivism. And then every so often, there were, you had people in the background chipping away at that facade. It's like chipping away at this idea that people are in favor, like there's a sense of unity there. And it was off-putting. For me, from the outside perspective, it was off-putting to get this, to be very, very aware of how false this sense of unity is. And so I guess that maybe it's just me, maybe that sort of feeling of that feeling of just of it being a commercial, being so fake. It was so fake, and that made it really hard to watch. Because say what you want about the RNC, there was a lot of emotion there, a lot of real dissent, a lot of real voicing of grievance. At the DNC it was so manufactured. The unity was so manufactured to watch that it made it hard to sit through a lot of the time.
Well, I certainly felt that as sitting there. I mean, I was really sad, I have to tell you. in addition to really not paying attention to any of the speeches because I was so glued to my cell phone and all these actions we were planning, and we were connected by text, and we were connected by email, and we were connected by fire chat, and I was monitoring all these things, constantly worrying about my battery being depleted. And one great thing that we had was we had the California Cafe, which Tom Steiner, this billionaire who has started Next Gen Climate, and he's putting all his money towards stopping climate change, although he refuses to come out for a ban on fracking, and I got to argue with him about that at length. But he did this free cafe for us directly across from the entrance to our delegation. So we were constantly going in there and having free wine and beer and snacks while charging up our cell phones and watching the convention on the monitors. But yeah, I mean, it was just it was most certainly Orwellian when they decided to chant over us when we chanted "No More War" and they were chanting "USA." I mean, since when did "No More War" become something so horrible that you want to chant over it, you know? And I was thinking to myself, don't they realize that this is what they chant at Trump rallies? And then it kind of hit me after I realized how bellicose some of these speeches were and how many Republicans they had trotted out to endorse Hillary. It just hit me, you know what? They don't even care about getting Bernie supporters votes anymore because they're just going right after the Republicans. And she's moving right back to the center where she feels more comfortable. So it was very sad because we definitely could see, because we were communicating with people back home on our Facebook pages, that a lot of the stuff that we were suffering through and observing there on the convention floor was not submitted to projected to the people at home watching in their living rooms. And yes, they were seeing this carefully staged and choreographed unity fest that was really not the case in reality.
Yeah, absolutely. And real quick, I want to hop over to the comments. We've got a few more delegates over here, and I'm just going to go through some of this. It's kind of backtracking a little bit, but so Dan was another one of our delegates. He actually has the flag that I wrote on. I had put it down because I was shown an article that said flying a flag upside down was punishable with jail time and a multi-$1,000 fine. So I said, forget that. I'm not going to get arrested here at the DNC. Megan has informed me that the person who the family that was sitting behind me was Chloe Grace Mortis and her family. She actually spoke at the convention prior to doing what she had done. Another comment by another one of our delegates, Dan, who actually sat next to Javier, the Hillary subcaucus chair, and a few other folks, said he had a really good experience there on the fourth day. He did an absolute wonderful job in helping keep our group coordinated, as did Megan. And then getting back to the shirts, the Bernie Sanders shirts in particular, wasn't, as Megan says in chat, it was absolutely anti-Semitic. So a lot of the shirts were World War II propaganda just repackaged for, today. The Bernie Sanders shirt was, I've seen different memes online showing it side by side with Nazi propaganda against the Jewish people, and you can see it on screen. That's disgusting. That is quite simply disgusting to see done to somebody, especially after the DNC, even before this, but in addition to the DNC leaks coming out, and hearing that they were going to use Bernie Sanders, the fact that he's Jewish, against him in parts of the South. Absolutely unacceptable. Hillary Clinton's shirts, by the way, for those that don't know, almost looked like World War II Japan propaganda with the rising sun image in the background with her head down. I mean, when we say Orwellian, a lot of times I think it can be used in just this general sense. But I really feel like you could have been brought into a George Orwell book right there at that convention. And I want to know, Eric, do you have any questions before I hop back over to Lauren and Kat? After you unmute yourself.
Yeah, it's screaming at me. It's saying, "Hey, buddy, you're muted." So it tells me too. So I just I kind of wanted to move in, maybe switch gears a little bit, if you guys are cool with that. And we had Lauren and Kat with us. I think we should maybe talk a little bit, and Lauren started touching on it already a little bit, so did you, Adair, about what we do going forward as Bernie supporters. And obviously there's going to be a drop-off. Obviously some people are going to kind of give up hope, but obviously we're all still here, and I know Lauren's very active where she's at, so I was also wondering if Kat had any ideas about things we can do, and maybe some organizations we could work with. Are any of us planning on running for office in the near future, or maybe in just the future in general? What kind of things do you guys see as the future for the Bernie Sanders Our Revolution movement?
Kat, you guys want to? I know I'm thinking of running for city council. I'm exploring the option here in Olympia, Washington, of running and becoming a council member. Kat, Lauren, what about you two? I know, Kat, that you've been working with a lot of your down ticket folks here. I've seen it in chat as well. The biggest thing we can do is work to get the down ticket folks down to the local level, dog catchers, city council people, mayors, county commissioners, whomever. That's where you're most impactful, at least in my opinion. What do you two think?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I've seen a lot, especially after the convention, I've seen a lot of people talking about, you know, Dem exit and the third party, leaving to a third party, and saying things like the Democratic Party is no different than the Republican Party, etc. And I think it's really, really, really important to separate the DNC, the people that were at the top of the DNC for this cycle, and people who made the decisions, you know, going into the DNC. We need to separate that group of people and the Democratic National Committee and the corporatist Democrat movement from the rest of the Democratic Party, and that includes, you know, all the down ballot candidates that are running as Democrats and have been Democrats for a long time. That includes people who have been active in the party. So for me, I definitely want to see us stay together in the party and continue to build this progressive wing of the party. I don't think this is a time to get discouraged. I mean, when we look back at everything we did, we got 46% of pledged delegates in the Democratic Party this year. I mean, Bernie Sanders and our movement, our revolution, prompted thousands, literally thousands of people to run for office, millions of new people to become involved in politics. So it may seem like right now we lost the battle with the nomination, but if we stay here and stay strong and stay together and fight for candidates up and down the ballot at all levels of government, we absolutely can and will win the war. So for me, I definitely want to see kind of a progressive wing of the Democratic Party, and like Adair said, I you know, put a lot of time into the down ballot candidates in my district and just in the state of Washington. Honestly, those candidates are going to affect our everyday lives a lot more than the president, to be quite frank. And you know, I also wanted to kind of just backtrack a little bit with how Bernie endorsed Hillary before the convention, and the fundraising thing. This is kind of off topic, but a lot of that fundraising money went to people in West Virginia because of the natural disasters that they had been facing. And you know, I think that's kind of a side note, but the whole Bernie endorsing Hillary and him, you know, getting behind Hillary and saying we need to get behind Hillary, we need to take a step back and look at how much. I mean, next election there will not be 750 superdelegates, there will be 250. Sanders and Clinton came out with a plan to provide free college to kids under a certain income level. I mean, if that passes, that's huge, and that is not because of Hillary Clinton. That's because of Bernie Sanders and because of all of us and our movement. But we need to kind of take a step back and look at successes like that and recognize that those are successes from Bernie working with Hillary and pulling Hillary to the left on topics like that. It's not a success from him saying, well, screw the Democratic Party, I'm going to go stand on the outside and protest, and that will get that plan, moving forward. It's not from that. There definitely is some of that needed, but right now where we're at is a place where we have leverage, and if we're here to stay, and if we make it be known that we're here to stay, I think we can do a lot more good and have a lot greater of an impact than, if we all throw in the towels and scatter.
Well, listen, I'd like to disagree with you vehemently, and I'm twice your age, so I have several more decades of experience with people who have tried to make a difference in the Democratic Party. I voted for Jesse Jackson and was very involved with his campaign at the same time that Bernie was, and that was in the 80s, and then in the early 2000s I supported Ralph Nader. I have always voted, and then in 2004, Dennis Kucinich. I've always voted in the Democratic primary for the most progressive candidate, and I've seen that the Democratic Party is where progressives go to die, pretty much, and they all capitulate at one point or another. Now, I don't blame Bernie. I'm not one of those people that says that he betrayed us, because Bernie is 74 years old. He spent the last 25 years in the Senate. He feels comfortable there, and I think he wants to stay there and try to do his good work from that position. However, I have seen, especially since Clinton, and I actually worked for Jerry Brown, who in 1992 was actually progressive, and now I protest him because he refuses to ban fracking. But Jerry Brown was the insurgent campaign in 1992, running against Bill Clinton. And most people probably don't know this, but he only accepted $100 or less campaign contributions so that he would not be beholden to the special interests. And like Bernie, he managed to stay in all the way to the end. He was the last challenger standing after Paul Tsongas dropped out because he was diagnosed with Hodgkin's disease. But in any case, Bill Clinton really took the Democratic Party to the right when he realized, and I always use this analogy, people asked Willie Sutton, the famous bank robber, why do you rob banks? And his answer was, because that's where the money is. And similarly, Bill Clinton started raising money from Wall Street, because by the time he was running for president, the number of people who were in unions in this country, which was the traditional source of funding for the Democratic Party, had dropped precipitously. So once he became indebted to Wall Street and started the DLC, the Democratic Leadership Council, the party has really not been the same ever since. And I'm pretty active in state politics, and I have been fighting. You talk about down ballot races and not confusing, the DNC, the people at the top of the DNC, with the Democrats in the states. And I will tell you, we have a big problem in California with corporate Democrats, because California is a Democratic state. They never get control of the legislature. Sometimes they get control of the governorship. But in our issues, the things that I fight, most notably fracking, we are fighting corporate Dems. Most of them people of color, African American, Latino Democrats.
One sec. I'm gonna stop there, because that's treading, at least for me, some dangerous waters. And I know Brandon hasn't jumped in yet, so Brandon, if you could get in and everyone could cool off for a second, because I feel like things are getting a little bit too heated. Brandon, I know you really wanted to pop in. I'm really sorry about that, Lauren. But Brandon, could we get you in there real quick, buddy?
Well, I agree with Miss Steiner, to be perfectly honest. I feel that if we're gonna settle for incremental change, we need to incrementally change from the Democratic Party. That needs to be what we do, because I think that as far as the DNC leaks go, and as far as being cajoled and having their celebrities wag their fingers at the Bernie people for being Bernie or bust. The DNC leaks to me say that the DNC was Hillary or bust from the beginning. They were like, it was Hillary or nothing for them. To the end, you know, as far as calling Bernie or bust people reckless, which I mean, I'm not a Bernie or bust. I'm still going to vote, not for Hillary. I'm still going to vote. But the DNC was so reckless with their Hillary or bust sort of message that they were willing to put forth an inferior candidate, one who could not win her own primary, in order to, you know, solidify their power and use the rigged primary, because this is what it was. It was a rigged primary because it's a corrupt system. Use that rigged primary to give her a boon in the general election. Donald Trump is the best thing that ever happened to Hillary Clinton. If we were talking about a different, more politically savvy, more media savvy Republican nominee, she would have no chance. And if we're talking about Bernie versus Trump, Trump would have no chance. But now it's a close race, because this race has no reason to be close, and the DNC has been so reckless, and they've laid their cards on the table and said, we are willing to bet the farm on keeping the establishment in power. As we're willing to subvert democracy, willing to do whatever it takes to keep the establishment in power. And to me, that says, okay, then we have to move away from you because you're dangerous. And you talk about, this is being the Democratic Party, but I think what the DNC revealed and all of the harassment you faced revealed is that the differences between who's in the Democratic Party and who's in the Republican Party now it's team affiliation. It's, are you a Yankees fan or a Mets fan? Like, you're both New Yorkers at a certain point. And so at this stage of the game, it's time to end the two-party system. I think that's the only thing we can do to make a legitimate change. And I think it's not dangerous, but it's hubris to believe that everyone who has failed to make a change in the Democratic Party before you has just started off corrupt, or they were too dumb or too naive or too whatever to do it, and you're going to be the person to do it. I think that at a certain point we have to be realistic with our own capabilities and say, listen, no one sells their soul in one fell swoop. You sell it piecemeal, and the first step to selling your soul is saying, well, I'm going to play in this corrupt system. I'm going to accept that this is the only game in town, as opposed to just starting my own game. I think it's time to start our own game.
So where are the third party, not two party candidates on the ballot? And who? I mean, I continuously hear people say presidential race now, presidential race 12 years ago, 8 years ago, 4 years ago, 50 years ago. But why are we defining an entire political system on just the presidential race? What about the down ballot candidates? I mean, you cannot accurately say that every single down ballot candidate in every state, especially Washington, is part of the quote corrupt Democratic Party or the corrupt system you're speaking of. I mean, sure, yeah, people at the top, plenty of people are, but you can't just say, well, we're all of a sudden in a third party because there is no appreciate that.
I want to let Lauren finish her thought because I did stop her, and I would also like to clarify as to why. And this, in particular, Lauren, I understand where you're coming from, but I feel that race, or rather ethnicity, is more of an aggravator than a descriptor in this case, especially in light of what's happened recently as a black person, as a person of color, what I've dealt with recently from politicians and people within the party. Right now, that's more of an agitator than I feel a descriptor. So I would love for you to finish where you're coming from, but that is why I jumped in, because it got to a point where it could get offensive.
Okay, well, first of all, I don't want to say, like Kat said, that it's all the people. And I don't want to say that it's all the people of color in the party, because just as we have, people like Steve Bradford, who basically, when we fought this bill, that he was trying to kill community choice energy programs, which basically allows municipalities to band together and buy clean power and sell it to customers cheaper than the dirty power that the utility provides. He was trying to end that. And he was working in collusion with not only the utility companies, but also the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers. So we can also talk about unions who sell out. Sometimes the union leaders sell out the rank and file. As we know, so many unions endorsed Hillary and faced great pushback from their membership. But, you know, for every Steve Bradford that we have in California, we have Holly Mitchell, who is a woman of color who introduced our fracking moratorium bill and fought really hard for it. But the people that killed that were, you know, Democrats, as I said. And until we get the insidious influence of money out of politics to the point where politicians are spending 50 to 70% of their time dialing for dollars, any of them will be the first to admit that to you, I don't think we're ever going to be able to get politicians, even the best of them, to really represent constituents. Because one thing I remember learning in Government 101 in college like 40 years ago was that politicians exist to be reelected. They don't necessarily exist to represent their constituents, even though they may think they do coming in. You know, you heard the famous thing where Obama said if he, you know, he would rather be a one-term president and get important things done, you know, than capitulate just to get reelected. And he didn't even live up to that. So, but I would argue that Obama was not that progressive to begin with. So I think that Jill Stein right now represents to me, and, you know, full disclosure, I am applying for a job on her campaign to be her California campaign coordinator, but I did vote for her in 2012. So she was on my, in fact, when I first met Bernie Sanders in April of 2011, he was in, you know, Los Angeles at a fundraiser for his Senate re-election campaign, and at a very wealthy person's house. And when he finished speaking and it was Q&A time, I said to him, would you please challenge Obama in the 2012 primary? And I'll never forget how he answered. He said, no. That he was not going to challenge the incumbent president. And also, I didn't feel Bernie Sanders had any ambition to be president, because unlike Hillary, who feels she's entitled to this job, Bernie is a public servant, and he's just wanted to do his good work in the Senate all these years. And I think the reason he came in 2016 was he could see that Elizabeth Warren wasn't going to do it. I think he would not have run had she challenged, but he felt that, you know, after all these years of neoliberalism and neoconservatism, which is what I think caused the rise in right-wing nationalist parties in Europe, the Brexit vote, and the popularity of Donald Trump, the austerity caused by neoliberalism, with everybody being a debt slave pretty much, and the migration caused by the neoconservative, you know, overthrowing of these totalitarian dictators who at least kept Islamic fundamentalism under check. So now you have all these migrants coming from all these countries in the Mideast into Western Europe, flooding an already precarious economy. And so to me, the fascism that everybody's using, a term very loosely, and I studied fascism, and I think you have to be very careful with that term. I think Trump is a demagogue. I don't think he's a fascist, but he is fanning the flames, and what he is doing and what he is bringing out is a symptom of the problems caused by Hillary Clinton, who is the biggest I mean, she ran that State Department. She did not use diplomacy and negotiation, which is what the State Department is supposed to do. She used her position to open up foreign markets to American corporations. I mean, everybody knows she...
On that note, I want to get Kat back in. Kat, you didn't get to finish your thought either. Will you please finish your thought? Brandon, I want you to jump in next after that, please. Eric, I see you too, man. So after Brandon, I want to get Eric in. But please, Kat, finish your thought.
So my thought was just, okay, so if we're going to talk about moving to the Green Party, I mean, my thing is, where are the Green Party down ballot candidates? Where are, I mean, at least, especially in Washington, where are the down ballot candidates? Where are the candidates for city council, state legislature? I mean, we need to, I am all about breaking up the two-party system. I just don't see, I mean, if we are going to build a third party, and if anyone is going to build a third party, the leaders on top of that party need to be consistently, every year, every race, every second, you know, working to implement the values that they stand for and that the 99% stands for. They can't just put up candidates for president, to be honest. And I would like to see the Green Party. I would be open, very open to voting for Green Party candidates or third party candidates, you know, in all races up and down the ballot. But where have they been? You know, at the end of 2012, Jill Stein said how she got, you know, 0.4% of the vote, but she said that, you know, the American people were ready for a discussion in that sense. And so where was she the last 4 years to lead that discussion and build that discussion? I'm not saying that, you know, anything she stands for is wrong in any way. Everything she stands for I agree with, but how are we supposed to build a third party when there are no candidates or very little candidates representing that specific party in low levels of government?
Well, I'd like to answer that question.
Brandon's been waiting. Can I get Brandon in, please?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I'm sorry. Okay, well, I'm going to answer that question first, I guess. And I mean, there's a lot to unpack there. Well, first, I have to say that the Green Party runs candidates from every level on up. The Green Party across the nation runs candidates from dog catcher to mayor to governor. The mayor of Santa Barbara, California, was a Green Party member, and actually,
Richmond.
A lot of places. Thank you. But what a lot of people don't know is that in order to have major party status in the United States of America, you have to run a president. You know, a lot of people don't realize that as part of the laws in a lot of states, I can think of.
Oh, I realize that.
You have to have a president candidate.
To running a candidate for president.
And at a certain point, it becomes a lot of people have tied this idea that the Democrats and Republicans are where they are because they deserve to be there, and not because of the absorbent amount of money in politics. The Green Party receives so much less money, and I think people have forgotten that and internalized this notion that, okay, well, the Democrats are where they are because they have some sort of strong legislative agenda. They don't. It's not that we need, a second party. It's like Raphael said, not that we need a third party. We need a second party, and we need a second party on not theoretical social issues. We need a second party to disrupt the neoliberal agenda that both the Republicans and the Democratic Party have decided that they just go in a black box. We don't ever talk about them. And so, and the reason why I don't accept the notion that I don't think that all Democrats are corrupt. That would be silly. But what I do think is A, the hierarchy is corrupt, and B, the status quo. I'm sorry, the hierarchy and the rules exist to keep those who are corrupt in power. And so it's the same kind of thing when you talk about police brutality. Like, I don't accept the notion that a few bad apples and all these other things, I wouldn't accept it with cops. I don't accept it with any sort of organization that has a strict hierarchy. That's what we're talking about. We're talking about the Democratic Party has a very strict hierarchy that puts people in charge who are corrupt, and that corruption trickles down and keeps people who are corrupt in power. And I understand that at the local level, that is lessened, but it's like Ms. Steiner said, you have a lot of corporate money coming into local elections now, a lot of corporate money coming into city council elections, school board elections, state judge elections, county judge elections, to the point in which we're now talking about the well being poisoned. It's like it at a certain point it becomes easier to separate yourself from that poison. Well, I'm not saying it needs to be all at once, but it does need to be a slow trickle towards a real progressive party in America. It can't just be, well, we're going to keep giving them our power, we're going to keep giving them our votes, we're going to keep giving them our votes, we're going to keep giving them our votes, and then maybe one day they'll change if enough of us do it, because as they've proven, they're willing to rig the whole system, regardless of the demographics.
Hey, Sam, we get Eric in real quick? I know Eric had something he wanted to say. Eric, can you pop on, buddy?
Sorry, I think you saw me getting a little anxious because this entire discussion is like the inner monologue in my head. As some of you may know, especially Adair, Brandon, and Dave, I am going to run for city council very soon. I am a PCO for the Democratic Party right now. I wasn't fortunate enough to be a national delegate, but I was a delegate to the state convention here in Washington. And so I have been very involved within the Democratic Party, and I never thought about necessarily leaving the Democratic Party, even with all the things I was dissatisfied with, until DNC leaks. I don't deal with corruption. That is something, all the other things, the corporate money, all that inside, I was like, okay, I can get over it because that's not anything that is affecting my personal life, which sounds a little bad. And I thought that the infrastructure of the Democratic Party appealed to me because I want my message and my platform and the change that I want to give to our community. I want those things to happen, and I realized that outside of the Democratic Party, it will be a little bit more difficult. And so I wasn't going to go with the Green Party, even though I feel like my ideals line up a little bit better with the Green Party. But after the DNC leaks and seeing that this was so unfair, and I'm going to be completely frank, I still at that point had not made up my mind. But to see the way that the Democratic Party treated that situation at the convention, that is when I ultimately decided there is no way I can support this any longer. Now, right now, I'm in this state of flux where I am attending Democratic events because I am an elected PCO, and I'm also attending Green Party events, and so I'm kind of in both. And it's awesome to hear you guys discuss this because this is the discussion in my own brain right now, because half of me says if I join the Green Party and run as the Green Party, there may not be any chance for me to affect the change that I would like to affect within my community because I might not get the infrastructure to get elected that I need. But then do I really want to represent this party of corruption and that this party that idealistically is almost going against everything I say or everything that I say? I am wanting to be a candidate of transparency and openness and anti-corruption. I want people to know everything about me. I want to be completely open. I don't want to hide. And to see them demonstrate on such a grand level this idea of corruption and this idea of lies has really turned me off and has really made me feel like I cannot support something like that, especially by attaching my name to something like that.
Well, let me address that because...
One second. I want to jump in here real quick because I've listened to a lot of things being said by everybody in this hangout, and I also want to jump real quick because I want to mention something that we had in chat before I even get into what I was going to say, is Megan, who dropped a comment saying, according to her research, there are 100 Green Party office holders nationwide, right? So I think that's something that, A, would have to change, and I'm a lot, in this sense, I'm a lot with Eric here. Whereas I'm also thinking of running for city council, but I'm also have got one foot in the door with the Democrats because this is a party that I've seen the inner workings of. In Washington State, I know a lot of the people running as Democrats. I know a lot of the people. I've met a lot of the state party folks who I genuinely, especially our state party chair, I hold in with great deal of respect, who are good and honest people doing the best they can at the state level. And on the other hand, I've got one foot in the Green Party right now, and I'm exploring more of those options and trying to meet folks in the Green Party and build networks there, because I think if we're ever going to have a third party, we're going to have a coalition third party. I don't think that the Green Party can do it alone right now. The infrastructure just is not there yet, but I think if you bring the liberal Democrats and the Green Party folks together, if you start combining that, if liberal Democrats are willing to go out on a limb and say this is a Green Party candidate who is a liberal, they may not necessarily be in my party, but if you are a liberal and do not feel comfortable voting for this Democrat that they are running against, I will break this idea of I have to be a party slave and campaign and stump for this Green Party candidate, which I do think if I decided to run as a Green as opposed to a Democrat, my delegation would 100% stand behind me and be there to help. Now, that being said, I also want to backtrack to a point that you made, Lauren. 2 points, actually. The point about fascism and the way brown people going to Europe.
Going where?
I absolutely disagree with you on a huge point there. The Brexit was fueled by racism, plain and simple. If you look at the rhetoric, if you look at what's being said, it is 100% fascism. If we look at fascism, fascism is the idea that the country and the people are absolute number one. Nothing supersedes that. That's what was going on with the Brexit. Half of the campaign ads, and I see you shaking your head, Brandon, half of those campaign ads were the brown people are coming. The brown people are coming, and you see that here in America today with the Donald Trumps, with this rise of a toxic kind of nationalism. Well, hold on, I let everyone else speak. a toxic kind of nationalism of the likes we have not seen in America except back in, God, I want to say the 1800s. There's this idea that because it's not Mussolini or Hitler, it's not fascism, but I disagree, and I very much disagree with the way that brown and black people have been characterized in these situations. I vehemently disagree with that, and I vehemently disagree with the notion that a third party by itself isn't viable, and that by itself is viable. It has to be a coalition. We have to start building bridges between the two, but that's my 2 cents, and I'll let everyone else finish out.
Okay, so I'm going to get back to that. I'm not going to discuss the fascism thing because that could be a very pedantic and digressive conversation. But I do want to address what you said and what Eric said, because I think it's important to talk about what didn't happen. What didn't happen was your own Seattle City Councilwoman, Kshama Sawant, started Movement for Bernie, and very early on, she had a petition to ask Bernie to stop running as a Democrat, to join either with Jill Stein in the Green Party, to take up her offer to run as the president on the Green Party ticket, or to run as an independent. And Bernie never even had the conversation. I understand why. My understanding is that Bernie has not spoken to Ralph Nader since the year 2000. He unfairly blames Ralph for costing Gore the election. And I can link, on this YouTube video, several articles which disproves that. I'm not going to get into it right now. But I think that whether Bernie actually believes it or he thinks everybody else believes it, he did not want to be a spoiler. Now, what Bernie doesn't understand, well, I shouldn't presume to know what Bernie understands, but what I think he didn't appreciate, let's put it this way, what he didn't appreciate is that the situation in 2016 is very different from what it was in 2000, because independents, depending on which poll you read, either make up 43% of the electorate or 50% of the electorate. The two major parties have less than 30% each identifying as part of them. So if there was any year to run as an independent, this would have been the year to do it. Now, Bernie did not do that, and so we lost that opportunity. But I agree with your point, Adair, totally about coalitions, and that is what Movement for Bernie, which is now called Movement for the 99%, aims to become. It wants to be a coalition of, Kshama's party is Socialist Alternative, but they want to get Greens and Liberal Democrats and anyone who wants to be part of that to start this new third party. And I think that you have seen what she said, what Jill Stein said, and also what Bernie said, is that it really doesn't matter who the candidate is because it takes a social movement. So what we all need to be focusing on is building the social movement and to support the candidate. Like, I think the social movement that Bernie responded to was the Occupy movement. I mean, Occupy did not believe in candidates, and they had their reasons. But Bernie, if there were an Occupy candidate, it would be Bernie. So we need to have we need to help build this third party, this party of the 99%. And I think that what Bernie showed, which is very revolutionary, and the mainstream media don't focus on it enough, is that you can raise money from small dollar donations. That's what Brand New Congress is trying to do. They're trying to run a slate of about 400 plus people, not, career politicians, but people who are making a difference in their community, and run them using, a common Bernie platform through crowdsourcing. And I'll just end on one note because I see you have your finger up and you want to get in here. But Richmond Progressive Alliance, which is the second time I met Bernie, he did a fundraiser for them. These are 3 people, including Gail McLaughlin, who's a Green Party, former mayor of Richmond, ran against the Chevron-backed candidates. And even though they were outspent 20-1 in Richmond, they won because they went door to door and organized the people, and the people knew, and this is what you can do on a local level. You can go and meet your constituency, even if it's not going door to door, have town meetings in the neighborhoods, and this is what Bernie did. I mean, you hear Jane tell the story all the time. He won mayor by 10 votes, And they didn't even give him his own secretary. They were so against him in his first year that he went around and built alliances with all the community organizations, and then he was able to get his candidates into the city council to help him. So that's what it takes.
One sec. We've got 5 minutes, and we got to get everyone else to get their closing statements, and we don't disagree there.
Retail politics.
We don't disagree there. Once I got to get everyone else, and I'm going to finish wrap my thoughts up. I don't disagree with you. We don't disagree. For full disclosure to all of our viewers, I'm voting Joe Stein for president. That's my personal conscience choice. Brandon, your last thoughts, then Kat, and then Eric, and then we're going to wrap it up, guys. I'm sorry that my ability to get timing down wasn't as great. Brandon.
Okay, so yeah, I'm going to agree with Lauren Steiner as well. Like, I don't care if it's fascism. But either way, Trump is not Hitler. He's Berlusconi at best, if we're going to go down that route.
That's not what I said. I'll clarify in our podcast.
It doesn't make a difference to me. Because at the end of the day, if you are accepting of this notion, and also at the same time with the Brexit, I would love to discuss the plurality of who voted for the Brexit and why it's important. But even if we boil that down, the enemy here is neoliberalism. And so I can't in good conscience oppose the Republican Party for their racist rhetoric, for their demagoguery, for their fascism, for their jingoism, for their neoconservatism, any of these things, and not in good conscience oppose the Democratic Party for feeding into that exact same machine. They just do it with a different set of rhetoric. And so at that point, it comes down to, like, if I'm really, really, really against the Republican Party, if I'm really, really, really afraid of Trump, I need to also get rid of Clinton. I need to also get rid of the Democrats, because they are going to make another Trump. Like, that system is going to produce another Trump very soon, and after Clinton wrecks everything for the next 8 years, he's going to win. And that's when it's going to be. That's when it's going to be a bad day, because that Trump will be worse. He'll be smarter, and he'll be crazier.
I agree.
Okay, well, what I want to say is that I hear and I totally agree with a lot of these thoughts that we need to build a progressive coalition. And Lauren, you were talking about Socialist Alternative and Green Party kind of working together to build that. But there are progressive Democrats. We can't shut out Democrats, point blank, period. I've seen a lot of these, coalitions for the 99%. You come in and say, oh, I don't despise the Democratic Party, and it's like, oh, well, the whole Democratic Party is evil, like, this is basically not for you. And that's not going to be successful. Yes, we need to build that coalition, but anyone that wants to have a hand in that and wants to use that support and that platform and that coalition to launch a campaign for office or to support a progressive candidate, they should be welcome. And I'm not going to go into, the difference between Trump and the Democratic Party, because we have 2 minutes, but I completely disagree. 30 seconds. But I guess that's kind of what I wanted to end on, is that we can't shut out all Democrats or the Democratic Party just because the top and certain members of it are completely corrupt in a corrupt system. We need to fix the system, and I agree that will be with coalitions from several different groups.
So I just want to say, 2 seconds, that's probably what I got. We need to give a very special shout out to DC for running behind the scenes. He's been killing it tonight. And I just wanted to say, vote for people, not parties. And everybody have a great night.
Thank you.
Have a nice night.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you, everyone, for coming on.